Hey everybody, XEI here. Welcome back to another XEI Reads Dragon Age, The Stolen Throne by David Gaider. We are about to start chapter 3 in this episode, and let me just close this up real quick and just give you a bit of a summary as to what's gone on so far. And if you've missed part 1 and 2, go back. Part 1 is me trying to sort of figure out what this whole series is going to be about. Part 2, I sort of come to the idea that I want to explore in this series, and I think that I'm on the right track with it. But again, I'm still sort of figuring this out, and so this is one big experiment that I hope works out when it's all complete. So go back and watch those two, at least the intros, just to kind of, or the intro of part 2. It'll give you a very deep summary of the first 60 pages of the book, which is all about the introduction of the story, the theme of the story. And so I go into depth where right now I can summarize it as the theme of the story being about legacy. I think it's about Maric embracing the legacy of his mother, being the rightful ruler of Ferelden, the rightful bloodline for Ferelden, and Loghain's legacy now because of the death of Gareth, or presumed death of Gareth at the battle, to give them cover for Loghain to escape with Maric after giving his word to his father that he would protect Maric, even if it meant losing his father in order to get away. So I think it's very much about legacy. And so this is going to bring us to chapter 3, which is page 61. And I've already worked out the numbers here as well for what to anticipate for the next couple pages. Okay, so this is going to end at page 86. So here's the next part of the formula. It's what I like to call, so after the introduction phase of any story, it enters this pattern that I like to call a conflict arises. And the idea behind conflict arises is that something's going to happen that's going to shake up whatever was comfortable before. Now, it's clear that that's already sort of been done. The trigger was the moment where the camp got invaded and Loghain had to take off with Maric. So that's kind of, it was the beginning of, it was the roll into conflict arises. But I think now that Loghain and Maric are on the run, this is where we're going to see what that means. And so that's what this pattern is about. And this pattern comes with 3 phases. You'll notice that's a rule. There's a rule of 3s that happen in this this framework that I've created, this narrative patterns framework, or matrix, whatever you want to call it. So the 3 pieces here are there's the call to action. And so this is generally, as a reader or as a viewer, if it's for a movie or whatever, at this point in the story, you're going to get the details of the story that set up the foundation of what it is the hero needs to do from the hero's perspective. So from the reader's perspective, we got an idea of that. It's legacy. It's the chasing of the legacy. It's in Maric's for Maric in particular, it's embracing the truth of his identity in order to embrace that destiny. And for Loghain, I would say it's something like he has to get over the fact that the honor to his father needs to get transposed to be to the honor to the crown, which is what his father gave his honor to before he died, and he was explicit about that to Loghain. I think that's going to matter to Loghain eventually, and because I've played Origins, so I sort of know where this is going to end. But anyways, okay, so the call to action, this is usually where the hero gets, it's usually explicitly stated, like it's not ambiguous in any state. It's not ambiguous in any way. It's going to be something that's explicitly stated, whether that comes from Maric coming to the understanding of he needs to go after the crown somehow. He's going to get some names. He's going to understand what it's going to take. He might not know how to do it, but that's the next part. Okay, and if it's not from Maric, then it can be another character. They meet another character. They have an exchange with another character. Maybe it's a stranger, or presumably a stranger, but then maybe they become important later on. But the information is going to come from somewhere. Maybe it comes from the tavern, like the keep. Maybe they overhear something undercover. But they're going to get that message, and that message is going to be the call to action. So that's what I'm going to be looking out for here, based on my calculations. And this is where the formula gets kind of creepy, because like I said in the past video, I've done this for enough pieces of media that it's generally right, and I like to just do this as a creative exercise just to validate how many times it can be right. I think it's a fun thing to do. I've been doing it for 10 years. I know some people have hobbies that sort of make sense. I don't know, maybe this hobby does make sense. I don't care. I love this hobby. Okay, so anyway, so my calculations here are that the call to action is going to happen by page 70. I'm going to pay attention to that, and I'll try to remember that, and then I will let you know if it works out or not. But that's the fun of this exercise. The second part of call to action, I believe, is also going to happen in this chapter. It's what I call the hero's reluctance. The idea that at the beginning of the story, whoever your protagonist is, they're going to get to this point where the hero is going to learn about what needs to get done, but then they're going to refuse it. They're going to refuse the call to action. That can be anything from they don't agree with what they have to do. They don't believe in themselves. Maybe they feel entitled for something different. It could be that they don't care. Maybe they're just like, the world deserves to burn sort of attitude. I'm not going to do anything about it. They're going to be an indifference. But there's going to be a rejection of the call to action. So that's going to happen, by my calculations, by page 76. So it's going to be within the 6 pages after learning about the call to action. Something's going to happen where we're gonna get into the mind of Maric, and this could be Maric or Loghain, because I think there's going to be some parallel storytelling happening here. So I'll try to keep aware of that, but I'm trying to focus on Maric as the primary. Okay, so that's going to be something to look out for the next 6 pages. So this is going to lead us to the third part of this conflict arises pattern, and that's the one where the hero accepts the call to action. It could be a reluctant acceptance. It can be forced. They're forced on the path. It could be that something comes up where something is put into risk, and so in order for them to save something else, now they have to do it. I guess that's indifference too. I guess that goes to the first one I mentioned. Point is, Maric is going to not accept it, and then something's going to happen, and he's going to come to terms with the fact that he has to go on this path. I don't think that part of the storyline, that part of the pattern, is going to complete in chapter 3. I think that's going to roll into chapter 4, but I'll go into what my speculation is for chapter 4 after I validate or don't validate what happens with this stack of patterns. So I think I've summarized it well enough for the opening. I'm going to get started right now, and I will catch you when I have the first thoughts to say on the matter. It certainly didn't take long for me to lift my head up and talk about the very opening paragraph, which is about, the paragraph's half a page long, but the opening paragraph of chapter 3 has a very interesting, it has a very common, I don't know about interesting, it can be made to be interesting, has a very common symbol in fantasy literature, folklore, myth, etc. It opens with the forest, a very deep description of the Karkari wilds, and I'll read this one thing. The forest's dangerous reputation had yet to prove itself, but it certainly looked unlike anything he had ever seen before. The giant trees twisted like they were frozen in the throes of agony, and a perpetual cold mist clung to the ground. It gave the forest an ominous feel, one that deepened the farther they ran. The thing with the forests, or forest woods, trees in folklore, and the reason why they always come up, is because they have a very rich significance to many cultures through history. If you look it up, it'll go way back. And the reason for the forest is, I'm trying to call back a lot of memories now, so I'm kind of flying off the cuff here, but it's the idea that, trees are a living thing, but they don't move, right? And so they just keep growing, and they keep on, it's like they represent a certain wisdom for being still and just absorbing and being one with their surroundings and being part of that cycle. And the forest as a whole sort of represents life in general. So all life, just the idea of life, living. So if you have a hero that has to go through the woods, it generally means that this is a hero that's in search of themselves. The woods represent their mental state. It represents the fact that if they're not on a path, that they're lost and they're trying to find their path. Which now I'm looking at the book again, because I'm like, I don't think they're on a path, which would also be very significant from the symbolic angle. So if they're just running madly through the woods because they have to survive, that's important, because that's not just them physically running through the woods. in order to survive. That's now and with that description right there, like these are very human words. So frozen in the throes of agony, that's not something a tree feels, that's something a human feels. So the idea is that this is also symbolic of Maric's mental state, possibly Loghain's mental state, that their minds are racing. They're racing through their thoughts, they're racing through their acceptance of reality right now. And in literature and myth and folklore, this usually results in them finding a path, getting on a path, and then that path leading them to some reveal, some direction. And I'm saying that now and without passing this first page, but I'm willing to bet this scene or somewhere at this point there's gonna be a path. We're gonna encounter a path, and that path is gonna be important. Speculation is all over the place. That's what this series is all about. Here we go. To reiterate my point here, hours of panicked running through the thick and uneven foliage had turned into exhausting trudging and finally became a limping crawl. That doesn't have to be read as a physical manifestation. That's literally representative of his mental state, I'm sure. So let me cut in right here, because I did remember saying something about names in the second episode, and I don't think I ever got around to my thoughts on the name Loghain. And strangely enough, when I say his name incorrectly as Loghain, that goes to a second point in my head that I'll get into. But Loghain, so lo, as a word, it's not really used today, but in the old days it was, lo is to get the attention of something. It's to draw attention so that you know what I mean. So anyways, you get what I'm saying. If you read fantasy, you know the word lo. Lo, hey there, hey, what, hey, call, okay. And then gain, gain and loss, right? It's, for me, Loghain, it's drawing attention to the fact that this is a man who doesn't like to lose. That's what the name means to me. This is a man who does not, he's out to gain. He is out to gain. And not from a selfish perspective, although that it could be taken that way. But if you know his character, it's not quite, but it's sort of, if you've played Origins, it can kind of get twisted. But he's out to gain. He's out to win. He doesn't accept failure, and that's what that name means to me. I think names, they have if they're not intentional up front, they do carry upon them some sort of subconscious meaning that implies certain things when someone's it feels like something, even though someone doesn't know that the meaning's there. I believe in that kind of stuff anyways when it comes to literature. I think people pull in inputs, and writers drop inputs, and I don't think either really know when they're doing it all the time. So anyways, there you go. Oh, and the second part of the name, so when I say it incorrectly as Loghain, the reason for that is because I have the idea that he came from the farm, and so I thought that there was some sort of play there with that, and then it gets stuck in my head. Maric's got a sense of humor to him, which is, it was sort of implied in the first two chapters, but I think it's really shining here. And maybe it's because of the contrast between him and Loghain being so serious. But even their first deeper exchange here, where it's about Maric's like, well, I think we lost them, and Loghain's like, are you sure? Because you're a prince, so there's likely the whole Ferelden army could be after you. They could have got mages to start scrying for you. They could have released a pack of Mabari warhounds after you. Are you sure you're safe? And Maric is like, well, not anymore. You know what I mean? I'm paraphrasing, by the way. And then Loghain snorts in disgust, and then he basically says, well, the truth be told is that they'd be stupid to run into the wilds, because it's a savage country, just about as stupid as we were to have fled into them. And Maric says again, that makes me feel so much better. There's just this very subtle humor, or I don't know, I'm sure he takes things seriously, but he sort of brushes things off as if, I don't know if it's a self-defense mechanism, sort of like Peter Parker, like when he jokes. So I don't know. Oh damn. And then the next line after that is good. Loghain says, tone was icy, because you're on your own from this point. So he's gonna abandon a promise to his father? Not gonna happen. Let's see how this plays out. Maric called him on it right away. You're safe, aren't you? And Maric's like, you sure that's what your father intended? Good play there. Very quick. Like, I expect some of these things to happen like paragraphs in, or but no, David Gaider is just he just moves things along. He just whatever needs to happen. Let's move things along. Oh damn, that did not make Loghain happy. 2 quick steps, he was on top of Maric, hauling him off the moss and throwing him against the fungus-covered tree. Oh, don't break up his father. Yep, and there it is. He's blaming him for killing him. I called that at the end of the last episode. You don't get to tell me what to do. You can't knight me to make me throw my life away for you. We'll see about that, Loghain. We'll see about that. Ooh, interesting twist here. Man, I feel like I need to get more than like half a page before I open my mouth. But interesting, exchange here between Maric and, because like Maric just takes a punch to the face, for, you know, he took the blame. He saw the punch come and closes his eyes, takes a hit to the face, goes to the ground. And Maric points out, you know, I watched my mother die and I couldn't do a thing about it. And Loghain goes about not like as if he's not listening, because, you know, he's raging at the moment. Then Maric, like, he basically says, like, I was running from her killers when I met you in the woods. I had no idea that you weren't going to just throw me to the wolves once you found out who I was. I was going to go my own way, but you convinced me to follow you. Maric held out his hand in supplication. Why did you do that? You knew I was being chased. You knew there was danger. Loghain didn't answer. He remained with the thing. So it's an interesting turn of events, because Maric did not ask for this. He did not ask for Loghain to create the scenario that got Gareth killed, that got his father killed. Maric is not to blame. If you go, I mean, he is, but he's not. You know, like, if you go back and you see how, like, fate or destiny played out, then why did Loghain help this guy? He knew he was a dangerous thing to the community, but he helped him anyways, and he pulled him in, and things are what they are now. So I that's a very, very clever way to make these two characters just come to terms with the fact that they're in a situation that sucks, but they both sort of had a hand at the end of the day. Not intentionally, but they did. And Maric does point out that he wished he would have known about his father earlier. He would have knighted him earlier. He should have been part of his mother's rebel army. He didn't knight him because of, you know, the situation they're in. He could tell that he was a good man, and he should have been part of something greater. But he also understands that if Loghain has to leave him here and go back to the camp and see if there are any survivors, it's something like he would have done. So he understands that if that's what's going to happen, and he basically just says thank you, and yeah, thanks for saving me, and let's, you know, just leaves it at that. And also, I didn't mention, because I got carried away with the tree imagery and symbolism, they also open up this scene with mist. Mist is also a very important symbol in literature, in movies, and whatever. Mist is generally a sign of like lack of clarity. That's the obvious interpretation. When there's mist, you can't see well in front of you, right? You can't see the path that lies in front of you. In this case, and a trigger right here, because as Maric walks away, they do mention the mist again, and I can't find the line now, but it talks about like he can barely see his boots. Like that's how unclear he is of the steps he's taking. See how I worded all that, and it sort of makes sense to the from a literary standpoint. The character is lost. The character is lost. Both these characters are lost. They're trying to find out what they're supposed to do. They're trying to find their path. They are lost. And this goes back to conflict arises. Here you have the two protagonists of this book right now, and there's a conflict between them. That's not the primary conflict. Like there needs to be a bigger conflict that's going to come up. But there is a minor theme happening here where the conflict between the two characters is here, and the idea of like, well, what does Loghain have to do? Let's take a moment here, because I'm on page 65, so I'm half. Did I say 70? Right? I'm halfway to the point where we're going to get that theme. So let's take a moment here. We have a scenario where Loghain's path is to be his word to his father and protect Maric. Now, he did twist that. He saved him. He's gotten this far, and now he's on his own, and maybe he'll be okay and he can live with that. But there's a lack of clarity. He's shrouded in mist, right? His thoughts are foggy right now. He's not thinking clearly. And then for Maric, is he needs to get back. It's going to go back. He needs to get the throne. He needs to get the throne. That's his mission. He needs to figure out how to survive long enough to get back into a position where either he can lead a rebel army, and etc., etc., etc. But he doesn't even know if he can survive. He has the sister's dagger, so he's not completely helpless. We do know that he can be a maniac when cornered, but at the end of the day, he's wandering off more or less blind. He can't see he can't see his boots. He can't even see the steps he's taken. So the journey there is it's blurry, and this is leading us into the whole hero's reluctance. You got to cross page 80 before that sort of those ideas start getting embedded into the narrative. So I'll be back. And sorry, but I'm already back because partway through this page here in this paragraph where Maric walks away, we do get another environmental, so establishing the scene descriptor, which usually has some ideas, some subtext embedded in, and I'm just going to read the last chunk of this paragraph. The forest around him seemed to be getting thicker and darker, if possible, when he realized that he really had no idea even which direction he was going. He couldn't tell where the sun was, and he could barely see the sky. For all he knew, he could be heading farther south into the wilds. So there we go again with the forest. Like forest is life. His life seemed to be getting thicker, so more complex and darker, more unknown, if possible. And he realized that he really had no idea which direction he was going. That's him being lost. This might play into the whole hero's reluctance. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know how to do what he needs to do. So he couldn't tell where the sun was to light the path, right? He didn't have the light. You couldn't see the light. These, like I said, I think sometimes it's subtextual. They find meaning in things, etc., etc. But I think David Gaider is just a good writer. Okay, moving on. And then as he stood there scratching his head in confusion, he heard steps behind him. He turned to find Loghain approaching. David Gaider just moving things along. And again, because I've mentioned the environment stuff now, I'm hyper aware of it. And to continue that chunk of paragraph, Maric had to admit that he had never felt quite as relieved to see anyone, especially Loghain in his formidable leather armor, stepping as easily in the mist as he might have on even ground. The man certainly didn't look happy. But anyways, it doesn't matter. So do you see how the sentence, like how it plays into the idea of what we've already established about Loghain and his character? When Loghain makes a decision, he's out to win. He's out to do what he has to do. So much so that this mist doesn't even cloud his judgment. It doesn't cloud his mind. He has found his own path. He walks blindly on this path. I'm telling you, man, I could do this shit in my sleep. Let's move on. And he immediately says to him, 1, you have a good way with words. It's the first thing he says. And then 2, I don't imagine my father meant for you to get away just to die like an idiot in the wilds, which is exactly what would happen if I didn't help you. So there it is. Very quickly turning this around. He's not doing it because he wants to. He's doing it because of that bond to his word. That's what gets you in trouble, Loghain. That's what's going to get you in trouble. So he continues, so I'm going to see you out of the wilds and get you back to the rebels. Once that's done, we're through. Do you understand? Yes. Then no thanking me. I don't want any reward. Right. And I'm not calling you your highness. Please don't. I like these two. It's because like Loghain isn't doing it to try to make a point, or like it's not his character. He's not trying to jab. He's just being matter-of-factly like, these are things I'm not going to do. And Maric's like, that's perfectly fine, because, and he's not really doing it as a jab, but he's like that good of a rule. Like that's what's going to make him a good ruler, though. You know, it's like he can just. He's not looking for the praises. He's looking to like almost. He's going to deserve what he gets, and that goes back to, I forget what the line was. I know I mentioned it in the second episode. There was some line that talked about, it was a memory about something his mother said to him about you have to deserve the loyalty you get from the people who call you king or queen. So, and Loghain's scowl deepened, like he had been half hoping for an argument. Since there was none forthcoming, he waved vaguely in the direction of Maric had been heading. So it's the idea that, like, they're just both very pragmatic, and it's interesting because actually they're, for different reasons, like they're motivated by different things, but they're so pragmatic about just what needs to be said and what needs to be done that neither wastes time. They don't waste time. They just move, and that's gonna. I think that's probably gonna matter. That wasn't explicitly stated, but I think it's gonna matter. Okay, so we got our first break by page 67 after that scene, and we do sort of have the call to action has most definitely kicked off, at least from the perspective of Loghain. Loghain coming to accept what his call to action is, and he was reluctant at first. We got through that phase, and he's accepting it. And from his character's perspective, I feel like that's happened a couple. I mean, these formulas aren't perfect; they're not meant to be. But I feel like it's happened strangely earlier than the formula. But it's not so much the formula; it's that it's earlier than I believe Maric has come. So the primary character hasn't really come full circle, hasn't gotten through this pattern. But I'm calling him a secondary character, but I don't call him as like a B character. He's still one of the primaries, but in this duo, I think he's the second thread of story. I could be wrong, but it could very much be both of them have equal. They probably have equal stay here, to be honest. Actually, I'm about to say that. I mean, they're both on the cover. They both really do take almost equal. In the first 60 pages, they have an equal share of meaningfulness in this book so far. So I'm going to retract what I said about Maric as the primary. I was only saying that because it's called the Stolen Throne. It's about him getting the throne back, but I think it's going to take both of these guys for that to happen. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm still curious to see how Maric is going to pan out. I feel like it's already sort of happened, but it hasn't been explicit. And I'm always looking for that explicit. Like it can't be ambiguous, that's all. So I'm still waiting for it. For the next 3 days, the pair of them travel the deep forests of the Karkari wilds. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but the rule of threes is a very big thing in fantasy. So of course it was for the next 3 days. So for the next 3 days, the magical number 3, they probably bonded in ways that we don't need to waste pages on. That's what the rule of threes is all about. It's a magical number. I love that during the first day, it's like Maric just doesn't shut up. He's always like excited about the things he sees. He always has something to say about lore, recollection of lore, etc. And Loghain, he just stays quiet and wishes you shut up. And then by the second day, Maric actually does start going quiet, and Loghain actually starts missing. He feels like he's missing the chatter. And then he goes on to, or we're in his perspective, Loghain's perspective. It must have been easy for the man to make friends, Loghain surmised. Even exhausted and half covered in filth, Maric had a natural, easy charm. Oh, and then, as Maric was the favored son of a queen whom Loghain's father had all but worshipped from afar, Loghain truly wanted to despise him. He had every reason to despise him, but the truth was, he just couldn't maintain the cold fury he had felt before, and that was almost worse than anything else. We're on the second day. So on the third day, always the rule of threes, on the third day, something's going to happen here that's going to be relevant and important to their relationship. I will summarize soon enough. So on the third night, wolves appear. Loghain basically shoots arrows at them, scares them off, makes sure that they just make it through the night. And on the morning, Loghain was wary, chilled to the bone, and became more than a little concerned when he found Maric shivering and unable to wake up. So pale he was almost white, Maric could at best be roused to a strange state where he uttered delirious nonsense through his chattering teeth. And Loghain just gets right to it, builds a fire. It's no mean feat considering the mist and the rain drenched almost everything. He dug up dead wood, searched for dry moss and twigs, and then hours of smoke and embers. But eventually there's fire, and when the flame finally caught, he could have jumped for joy and would have given much to listen to Maric ask 20 different questions about how he managed it. But that didn't happen. He just back to task and just kept the fire going. As Loghain wakes up hours later, Maric is already tending the fire and keeping it ablaze as well, and Loghain turns to him, "Do you have any idea how much trouble you've put me through?" And Maric rubs his arm, shivering. "Well, I'm very happy not to be dead, and that you didn't leave me here. to freeze. Loghain says, the wolves would have eaten you long before you froze. Well, that's something, Maric says. So within 3 days, some bond happens. Whether Loghain intended for one to happen or not, by the second day, he was hoping that Maric was talking, but of course at that point it seems Maric was probably already feeling like crap, but Maric was trying to probably not put on a show, but he was trying to remain strong because he's gonna, if Loghain's gonna keep moving, he's gonna keep moving with him. Like, he's going to try to keep up with the Loghain. But then he eventually just shut down. His system shut down. It got cold. Maybe he could have died. I don't know. It feels like that would have been too abrupt. But at least he feels like he could have died, and Loghain saved his life. And so by the time they get through those 3 days of bonding, it seems like they're having conversations like civil individuals that have known each other for years. That's how it feels on the page. And so it says, on the 4th day, Loghain realized they were being followed. There's 3 days, and then by the 4th day, Loghain realized they're being followed. I literally read that line as I was summarizing the 1.5 pages for it. Okay, so let's see what's going down now. Is it wolves or people? Or is it going to be one of those dudes that we got names for in chapter 2? I'm wondering about those guys. I don't think those were throwaway names. They're going to have to matter. And I just want to point out here, I'm on page 70 when this happens. Page 70, folks. This is where the conflict arises is officially kicking in for the next 6 pages. And so by the time we got to 69, it was more or less formulaically, this is where the ratio or the pattern would have stopped describing the introduction. So if I was going to go explicit with the formula, this would have been the point where these two guys spend 3 days together and bond. That's the introduction of what is the story going to be. These two characters bonding, coming to terms with the legacy that they both inherited, and then trying to find the path to get there. And I think this is all coincidence. Don't get me wrong. I don't think this isn't a magical formula that works explicitly. I think this is coincidence. It's just a wonderful coincidence considering I'm doing this blind. So by page 70, this is where on the 4th day, Loghain realized they were being followed. This is the kickoff for conflict arises. This is where stuff's going to go down, and in the next 6 pages, we're going to get a snapshot of what it is these two characters are going to be dealing with for the rest of this book. You ready for this? This is where this stuff gets exciting for me when I play these exercises, is because I love when it plans out. Anyways, so here we go. I'm way too excited about this crap. Like elf eyes. Okay, this might... We'll see. Dalish, perhaps? Run! Loghain rasped at him, trying to clutch at the arrow shaft and get up at the same time, but it was too late. Elves materialized out of the shadows around them, running towards them with barely a sound. Oh, the Dalish, I love you. And caught by the elves. Netted up. And we have ourselves a break. So passage of time. Where does that take us? Okay, so this was throwing me off because I was like, there's no way the next 6 pages are going to be about the elves being part of the conflict. I mean, that's obvious to me because I played Origins, and I'm sure this is a setup to both introduce the lore, as I'm sure this book is going to do with the other races. Like, I'm sure they're going to introduce, there's going to be some scene here with like dwarves, possibly one that introduces the Coon and the Canary. So they're captured, they're tied up in front of a fire, and then it's actually, I didn't go through it because I was kind of ripping through the pages, but the exchanges between Maric and Loghain are actually pretty hilarious, and almost 100% of the time their exchanges are very short and pretty funny, just because of you can get their character, and they both have a certain style, like direction of their humor. It's very, very clever writing because it's so simple, and it's very... Okay, fine, let me find one. So Maric stirred and started groaning painfully. Loghain watched him until he finally cracked open an eye, recoiling instantly from the bonfire just as Loghain had. Maker's breath, he croaked, and began coughing hoarsely. Careful, Loghain cautioned. I could really do without being hit on the head anymore. Complain to the Dalish. Perhaps they take requests. I'm like, wow, so Loghain's got a sense of humor when he was young? It's a simple thing. And then Maric sat up, squinting past the fire. Is that who they are? You don't know about the Dalish? Well, he shrugged. I had other things I was supposed to learn, such as how to be taken prisoner by outlaws, apparently. Loghain smirked. Here, I thought you were just a quick study. It's just these exchanges. They fire fast. And then we have another one here where Maric sniffed, then shivered in disgust. What's that smell? Jasmine? Maybe. What do they do? Roll it up and smoke it? Just what? And then another one. Hello, Maric suddenly calls out to them, looking around. Well, then have you speak to us. Hello. Quiet, Loghain snapped. What? I'm just asking. Don't be a fool. Just bang, 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 bang. But of course, someone does approach. A young elf approaches. You speak the king's tongue? Loghain asked. He distinctly ignored the "I told you so" look. Maric shot his way. Most of us do, though only those who go out to trade with the outsiders get to use it often. Here in the clan, we try to keep our own tongue alive, just as we do our gods. Why are you here? Because you attacked us, remember? Maric answered incredulously. You are outsiders. You approached our camp. We had no idea that you were even here, Loghain said carefully. Oh, he's being a little more diplomatic than Maric at this point. Ah, the elf nodded, but seemed disappointed. Then you are with the others who fled here from beyond the woods. Others? Loghain spoke more quickly than he thought wise. There are others who have come here before us recently? Mm-hmm. Well, there was one, a man that our hunters caught far away from here. Where is he now? I will need to bring you to him. So there it is. Whoa. 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 I did not anticipate that. Okay, I'm gonna roll back because I was gonna fly through this because I didn't think it was gonna be important. But okay, so I will need to bring you to him. The elf sighed unhappily. He starts talking to other people in their language, blah, 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 right? The other elves look at each other uneasily. They approached and began untying Loghain and Maric's ropes. I'm sorry, the elf said, but if you are indeed from the place as the other man, we will need to take you as we did him. Please do not struggle. From his tone, he seemed to think they actually might. Maric looked around, seemingly confused. As his ropes loosened, he brought his hands forward and rubbed his wrists gingerly. Where are you taking us exactly? To the Asha Belinar, the woman of many years, the elf explained. The humans that live in the forest call her the Witch of the Wilds. Bum, bum, bum. Loghain's skin went cold. A witch. Anyways, now I'm going to keep reading. It threw me off. I did not expect that. Women of many years. We're going to get some Flemeth action in this book too. I'm really looking forward to that actually. Okay, we're theoretically kicking off Hero's Reluctance at this point, so something's going to have to start coming to a head here. And maybe the Witch of the Wild is... Oh, see, that would make sense. Now that I know it's Witch of the Wild, I'm going to speculate again for the next, I don't know, 10 pages I think we got left. So the idea that, now you have a witch character. Witch characters have meaning in folklore storytelling, right? I mean, you're talking about... and then if you know Flemeth, you know the context of the Witch of the Wilds. You know it if you play the games. So we have a scenario here where a lot of when it comes to heroes finding their journey, their purpose, when they get their kind of destiny put in front of them, in a lot of cases, I can't use a word like that because all stories are told in different ways, and so these are. But in fantasy, it's not rare. It's not rare to come across the beginning part of the story where the hero encounters an oracle, and the oracle gives them some not I mean sort of ambiguous, because as prophecies generally are, but gives the hero some prophecy, some line that you can't really interpret up front until you sort of get through the entire story, and then in hindsight things make sense to the prophecy. But that's also it's both a trope and it's part of just the construction of these patterns. And so now that I know it's the Witch of the Wild, I'm like, oh, okay, well now it makes it easy for me to speculate what's going to happen next. There's going to be some sort of prophecy drop. And now let's see if that's right. So the elves drop them off at the hut. If you played Origins, you know very well what this hut is in the middle of the woods. And the elves, they're as Chiral, I wish you and your friend well. And they leave. And then leaving Loghain and Maric standing in the shadows. The smell of the wood was fresh and clean after the recent rains. The sound of excited birds clear far up in the trees. Do we leave? Maric asked hesitantly. Oh, Maric. Loghain didn't see what good that would do. If this was indeed an apostate, she could no doubt bring them to her whether they wished to go or not. Let's see who this witch of the wild is, he muttered, gesturing towards the hut. Maric looked at him as if he must be mad, but said nothing. As they walked down the path. As they walked down the path, people. What did I say like 18 pages ago? As they walked down the path. And from the forest's clearing, they found a path. And they walked down it. The path, man. Path in fantasy. Very important stuff. Very important. That's almost the symbolic. That would be that would almost be the symbolic representation of. I did say it needs to be explicit, and I'm sure we're probably going to get to something that's more explicit. But as soon as a path is mentioned, that's usually the trigger for the hero's journey beginning. So the hero's journey, the hero hearing what he's about to hear, that's going to make him reluctant at first, and then come to accept it. Starts with the symbol of the path in most fantasy stories. Oh, wow. So is that... Maric's voice trailed off in horror, and Loghain followed his gaze up into the trees. There hung a corpse. A human man with clammy white skin like a fish. And then there's the descriptions, and then Loghain knew exactly who he was. Danon. Danon? Maric whispered. Loghain nodded. If I recall correctly, Danon was the first character we get introduced to, is it not? The first character we get introduced to in the first chapter. Danon shrugged. Yeah, I just flipped randomly to page 23. There's some tracks. So he was the one who found Maric with Loghain. Danon was with Loghain, and they found Maric. And okay, so let's see where this goes. Because see, speaking, I mean, these character was introduced. It's gonna, so even a death here, even though Danon might not have anything further, and usually when a character gets introduced that early, and they're not like a main character, they're like B or C tier, it's not necessarily that they're going to appear again in the story. It's more than anything, when a character like that appears early on. I think I mentioned it to one of the other side characters that they could be, I think it was the elf that has the scar in the ear. That had enough description to it, and the fact that there was a scar, that my gut tells me that one's going to appear later on, unless I'm going to be proven wrong here in the next couple pages. That one felt like it had a little bit more staying power. The Danon character was a little, it had description enough for you to know that you don't really like him, that he was an expendable character for the most part, criminal or whatever. He wasn't a Loghain, despite being kind of from the same, well, no, because Loghain's not a criminal. I think anyways, I don't remember the exact details behind Danon, but I remember not liking Danon as a character. But it was sort of and the fact that like Danon sort of challenges Loghain at one point, but Loghain stands his ground, and that's what gets him the respect. I guess the respect between criminals, right? Is like you always gotta stand your ground when a criminal's trying to intimidate you. You gotta be more intimidating than them so that they understand rank. So I'm curious to see how this plays out, and the value of Danon being the one that's hanging there. I have to believe he probably did something wrong to Witch of the Wild. Flemeth didn't just go around killing dudes. Well, I mean, the tales say differently. Let's just keep reading. Let's see what happens here. Jesus, I see you're already acquainted with my newest trophy, came a new voice. A decrepit woman hobbled into view from among the trees. She was the very picture of a witch. White hair, wild white hair in a robe, formed mostly of thick black furs and dark leather. She waved absently in Danon's direction. He never did introduce himself, foolish lad. I warned him after he started with the bellowing. She stopped and appraised Loghain and Maric carefully, both of whom stared at her agape. Thankfully, it doesn't seem like either of you has the same problem. Good. That will make this easier. Okay. I still don't have what I want here. Hold on. You killed Danon? Maric asked incredulously. Did I say that? She chuckled. I don't believe I did, in fact. If you wish to know the truth, the lad killed himself. What? Magic, Loghain swore. The woman cackled in renewed amusement, but said nothing more. God damn it, Flemeth. No, I'm actually going to read this out because these exchanges are probably going to be valuable. I'm almost reading like live at this point, which is something I'm trying not to do, but these exchanges are just, I mean, Flemeth's exchanges now are very good too, and I can anticipate how they sort of sound in my head now because I've seen her in 2 games. So who are you? Maric asked. I don't care who she is, Loghain asserted. I don't like being played with. He stepped threateningly towards her. She responded by narrowing her small eyes, but nothing else. I demand you let us go. You demand? She seemed impressed by the notion. See, things like that. After you've seen Flemeth in the game, you're like, Loghain, man. Not good. Don't. And then the next line, Loghain. Maric cautioned. Loghain held up a hand, warning Maric back. Oh, geez, Loghain. Yes, I demand, he repeated slowly. Casting spells does not impress me. You need time to cast, and I can break your neck before you lift a finger. She smiled at him, a broad grin full of teeth. Now, who said that I would be the one to do anything? Jesus! Loghain heard Maric's sharp intake of breath behind him, but turned only in time to see one of the giant trees reaching towards him with lightning speed. Interesting. She wasn't lying. She didn't do it. Up Loghain goes, another trophy for the trees. Oh god, so it's only Maric left. So this goes back to an earlier point I made where we sort of know where Loghain has kind of made his decision and he's on that trajectory, you know. And I was debating the whole primary versus secondary, and then I retracted, and they both kind of have equal footing. But here we have a perfect setup for the end of, we're coming to the end. I got about 5-6 pages left. We're coming to the end of chapter 3, and here we have a perfect setup for the next 5 pages to be everything about Maric, the focus point, going back to me thinking that he's the primary. But I don't, but I do. It's hard to explain. So here we go. Let's see where this goes. Are you to be next then? She asked. I'm hoping not. An excellent choice. It's very good dialogue in this book, man. Oh man, so Maric tries some diplomacy, gets down on a knee and apologizes for the provocations, but they've been running for so long that they just anticipated that they were just going to get more of the same, just people trying to screw with them. And she says, manners, but that is unexpected. But the truth is that you don't know what I intend for you and your friend, young man. I might intend to give you both to the Sylvans, just as I did your friend. Isn't that so? Yes, it is. Yes, she repeated slowly. It is. Flemeth, man. Goddamn, you're creepy. But she waves a hand to the tree holding Loghain, and the branches unwind. Diplomacy won. Manners won. Shut up, Loghain. Shut up. Maric held up a hand, warning him to stay back, and Loghain snorted as if to tell Maric he was angry, not stupid. So good. It's so good. The lies are so good. Ooh, and then here we go. I'm kicking it. So page 81. So you are he, the witch said, nodding with approval as she studied Maric. I knew you would come. I'm reading this straight right now. I haven't pre-read, so I'm kind of getting shocked as I read because I know it's coming, and so I'm going to read it here live. I knew you would come, and the manner in which you would come, but not the when. She let out a sharp guffaw and slapped her knee. Isn't it marvelous how very capricious magic can be with its information? It's like asking a cat for directions. Consider yourself lucky if it only tells you where to go. And she howls. She howled with laughter at her own joke, because I got confused. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. It doesn't always make sense. And then her laughter slows, and well, what did you think? That the king of Ferelden could pass through the Carcari wilds and it would go completely without notice? And Maric licked his lips nervously. I'm assuming you mean the rightful king of Ferelden. Right you are. If the Orlesian who sits on your throne were to run through this part of the forest all by himself, I would happily scoop him up instead of you. Failing that, I suppose you will have to do. Wouldn't you agree? But see, if you know Flemeth, it was not an accident the words she chose to use there. I don't think so. Anyways. God damn. So of course then you get the whole, who is she? She's an apostate. The Chantries, hunters, I hunt these mages down for hiding in the wood. They're hiding in the woods, etc., etc. And then she just says, your friend is entirely incorrect. There are things hidden in the shadows of your kingdom, young man, which you couldn't begin to guess. Yet I was here long before your Chantry came to this part of the world. It isn't my Chantry, he snapped. As for your question, she looked back at Maric. So there's the drop of, she's older than you think. She never quite tells you exactly what she is and whatever, but always just dropping that reminder, And then of course Maric saying, okay, so then what do you want with me? This is the question. This is the question that's going to get the answer that I've been waiting for the end of this chapter. Why does anyone desire an audience with their sovereign? You want something from me? You probably would have been better off with my mother if that's the case. I don't have much of anything. Fortunes change. How interesting a word you should use there, Witch of the Wilds. Fortunes change. 1 minute you're in love, so much in love that you can't imagine anything wrong even ever happening. And the next you're betrayed. Your love has been ripped from you like your own leg. And you swear you do anything to make those responsible pay. Her eyes focused on Maric and her voice began to change. Became soft, caressing. Sometimes vengeance changes the world. What will yours do, young man? Ooh, and then Loghain steps forward angrily. Leave him alone. The witch turns to regard him, her eyes delighted. And what of yours? You've rage enough inside of you, tempered into a blade of fine steel. Into whose heart will you plunge that one day, I wonder? I wonder indeed. I wonder indeed, O Dragon Age Origins Ostagar. I wonder indeed. Damn. Maric and I are not friends, he growled, but I don't want him dead. Oh, you know what I speak of. We have betraying the friend but I think she knows exactly what she's saying, and she is not referring to Maric. We all know this. We know this. Loghain paled and regained his composure. Man, I'm reading too much of this out loud. So anyways, that doesn't matter any longer, doesn't it? Have you forgiven them already then? You no longer remember her cries as they held her crown, the laughter of the soldiers as they held you back and made you watch? Your father, when he stopped, Loghain shouted, and he, filled with rage, he Jesus Christ, he charges. I'm paraphrasing again. He charges. We didn't get the name yet. I'm making an assumption here because I know I'm right. But what a crazy bastard! What a crazy bastard! Anyways, he charges her, and then you see too much, old woman, he muttered. In fact, her tone was dry I see just barely enough. Please, Maric, step forward. Tell me what you want. Oh, snap. You should thank me, young man. She's referring to Maric right here. Fleeing into the wilds as you did, what do you suppose would have happened to you? Taken by chastened wild folk, slain by the Dalish, eaten by any one of the many creatures that lurk within its crevices. Do you truly think this one outlaw, I'm assuming she's referring to Loghain here, alone could have seen you through it all? I don't know. Maybe. That's a Maric response. She arched a brow at Loghain. He has quite the estimation of your capabilities, doesn't he? When he said nothing, she turned to gaze intently at Maric. Keep him close and he will betray you, each time worse than the last. There's that first, that's the first prophecy. It's not, it is sort of. That's the prophecy drop right there. So you brought me here to speak riddles at me then? There it is. It was bound to happen. It's a witch. Witch of the Wilds. Before Act 2, it's bound to happen. No, she waved her hand absently. I brought you here to save you. Show him the path. I've snatched you up from the brink of the proverbial pit, she continued, and I'm going to send you back out into the world, safe and sound. And what do you want in exchange for this? Help? Loghain demanded. A promise. She smiled. Made by the king to me in private, and then never spoken of again to anyone. Ooh. There it is, and it's going to come down to the hero's acceptance. Well, rejection and then acceptance. There it is. There's the proposition that Maric, and that's the explicit part I was talking about right there. So that's the conflict arises pattern. It's about the hero discovering what path they're on, what path they're about to go on. And it's usually something that's explicitly stated. And right here, Witch of the Wilds, and as a reader, we're not even going to know what this is, but we know it's there. We know she's going to ask something from Maric, and he's going to promise it to her, and he's never going to speak about it again. And she's a weird one, because then Maric blinked in surprise, but Loghain stepped in front of him, and if he refuses, she gestured towards the forest outside. Then you are free to go. She doesn't force anything, but you know she's manipulating crap. In her own way. Or it's the whole perspective of, like, if she's that old, then she's like, I don't know, I'll wait for the next king. You know what I mean? Like, she probably, like, because time would be different for someone like her, right? Because that perspective of time changes your perception of the world and the events in it. So here comes that decision point. I'm reading frantically here because I'm on the last page. The wind whistled in the trees far ahead. Maric wondered for a moment if they danced, for it almost seemed as if they did. Restless trees dancing to the music of the wind as they stood there in the shadows and silence. He looked at Loghain searchingly, asking for help, but there was no response. They were cold, battered, and exhausted, and in the middle of the wilds. What choice did they have? I accept, Maric said. Cool. And it's that loop again, back to the descriptor of the forest once again. So this chapter opened with the trees, and they found a path. It closed with the trees. Also winds, like the winds of change and all that stuff. So the winds whistled in the trees far ahead. So the winds as a symbol usually generally means that something's about to shift, like something's about to change. Restless trees dancing to the music of the wind as they stood there in the shadows and silence. So for a moment there, yes, there's darkness, but there's also this sort of peacefulness in the silence. It's like there's no more, that the first visuals we got of the woods, right? That were sort of if they are to represent the mental state of characters. Now we have one here where there's darkness, so it's almost like he doesn't know what his future is going to be. There's darkness and silence. So silence isn't always a bad thing. There's silence because he doesn't know what direction, like what is the decision, what is he going to do. There's almost, it's like a restart. When there's silence, it means you're in the present. You can decide where you're going to go from here. You can decide that the noise you're going to make, you can decide the sounds you're going to make, the music of the wind as they stood there, which is also fun. It's like a weird sentence here though. Restless trees dancing to the music of the wind as they stood there in the shadows and silence. It's strange because you got the music of the wind, which implies sound, but he's standing there in silence. So just sentence construction like that is interesting to me all the time. Anyways, there you go. So sort of out of desperation, cold, battered, and exhausted, and in the middle of the wilds, middle of the forest, so middle of life being thrown at them, and having to decide where to go to next when surrounded by a bunch of choices, by a bunch of possibility, and they found this path. So yeah, so it all lines up. It's strange how it all plays out. I mean, we did sort of ramp through the notion of the hero's reluctance. I guess the hero's reluctance would have been at the start, where the start of them finding that path, which would have been at the trigger point of where the hero's reluctance would have kicked in. And it's like, do we go down this path or not? Do we, like, we're gonna go to an apostate here, the Witch of the Wilds, whatever this person is, and so they're at that point. And remember that line that Maric says, right? Do we just leave? Do we just leave? That's the hero's reluctance right there, in one very short statement made by the primary character. Do we just turn around? Do we just leave? The path is before you. Do we just leave? That is the hero's reluctance, all summarized in one line. And then hero's acceptance. This is technically going to kick off into chapter 4, but as you could see, the very last line of chapter 3 is I accept. In a very small line, you get hero's acceptance. So in my readings and on my studyings and like studying of literature and movies and stuff like that, and how I came to kind of figure out these patterns and define them the way that makes sense to me, into this kind of matrix that makes sense to me, so I can find these patterns quickly. It's it's amusing to me. It's interesting to me when I come across things like this, where even as I was reading it, I was almost still searching for these things, searching for these points. And when I put the book down and it was that one line of I accept, there's no more, I've labeled it hero's acceptance, and it's just a strange phenomenon to me when crap like that happens. And then the reluctance is, do we turn around after seeing the path? And I think those symbols are... Anyways, I'm looping around into this thought because I really do love the idea of the subconscious symbolism driving a writer and a person's interpretation of writing. And so I can't wait to talk more about the other patterns, because I've never had an exchange that I guess has this much of an audience. Like, I've talked to people about this narrative patterns framework in the last 10 plus years. I've talked to people about it. I've implemented it. It engages people in a way that it is not, you don't need to know how it's doing it. It's just that these patterns have existed for so long that I believe, and I'm trying to prove it with this stuff, that these patterns have existed for so long that they're part of our makeup. They're part of the makeup of our understanding as we grow up as children, as we grow up through childhood, and then getting, the inputs from our cartoons, inputs from the comics we read or whatever. Those writers also grew up and they got inputs from the cartoons they watched and the stories their parents told, and the lore and like the little rhymes and and that all comes from oral tradition and how these sorts of things kind of got embedded into our universal subconscious, universal consciousness, and that all feeds back into writers. When writers or artists or creators are pulling on ideas, it all taps into your whole history of pulling in these signals. I'm going on too much about this and not the book, but because there was a point to it and I've sort of derailed myself by talking about this, I would love to turn this into something more officially. I've always wanted to create a sort of book for this stuff. It's just I don't have the confidence to put this into anything I would release, but I would love to get to a point in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years of like doing more of this exercise, having like putting it out there like this, because this is the thing. I've started this channel and all these pieces sort of are coming together, but I never intended to ever take this kind of exercise to a larger audience and then kind of talk my way through it, especially blind, because of course there's a bit of that, you know, what if I'm wrong, right? What if I'm wrong about all this? Maybe I'm just kind of to a certain degree, as you know, any reader does find their own meaning in things because of their own experience, the experience they bring to the medium. I love storytelling patterns, and I'm talking about it now. I'm derailing on this episode when it should be about the book, but it's really just I'm just excited about the notion that this book is already sort of meeting the criteria, and I'm not going to look like a complete buffoon by going through these narrative patterns blind and putting them out there to a larger audience for the first time. And my confidence is increased just a little bit because of those 2 lines. Do we turn around? I accept. And oof. I can't wait to see where this goes, and I can't wait to see what comes next. So segue now into chapter 4 and a bit of speculation on what this could mean. I feel like the hero's acceptance portion of it is not done yet based on the ratio, and so I'm speculating that the first 5 or 6 pages ish, I don't know, I haven't done a page count, so I don't know what the ratio is, but anyways, so I feel like the first piece of chapter 4 is going to be an exchange between Maric and Loghain, and them having a discussion of what it means to accept the path. And I'm going to say Maric is on, but I do feel like both of them sort of have a path that has been that, you know, the reluctance and the acceptance. But I do think the primary one is, I'm going to retract again, but I do think Maric's story is going to be the primary one, and they're going to have a discussion. And we've already been told that we're not going to know what Maric has agreed to, and I think that's a little bit gimmicky on David Gaider's part, because as readers, he's trying to build up the drama behind what the hell did he agree to, like what is going to have to happen. And so there's something in the pattern matrix where this particular event, there's going to be what I call a mirror scene. Something's going to happen later on in almost an exact ratio from the opposite side, and it's going to call back to this thing. So I think as readers we're going to get what that was, and it's going to affect the way that the last arc of the story happens. So Act 3, it's going to affect Act 3 very significantly. We have the first pattern, introduction. We have the second pattern that we're almost through, conflict arises, and now we're going to move into a pattern I call journey begins. And in the journey begins pattern, I've got that split off into 3 because of course 3 is easiest to remember. I'm not going to go into all of them now. I'll leave that for next episode's intro. This is where you start establishing your B cast or your supporting cast. This happens in movies, this happens in short stories, this happens in everything. Your B cast comes after the introduction and the conflict declaration. You have to tell the reader, you have to tell the audience what it is they've signed up for before you start throwing a bunch of other characters at them, because then you blur what the theme is, you blur what the story is and people are signing up for, you blur what the conflict is. You blur that moment in time where your protagonist is basically saying, this is the journey I'm going to take you as an audience on. And so the B cast comes after that. And this is like a bridging point where Act 1 is about to end and kick off Act 2. At least this is the way I've partitioned it in these patterns. And so we're going to get, like, we don't know, we had characters like Paddock got introduced, like the scout, so we don't know what happened to him, but I think he's probably gonna have and then we have Potter, which is that scarred elf guy, and I do feel like he feels like someone who's gonna return, but I don't know. But I think those two characters and this Danon guy who got snuffed out at the end of this chapter, but the idea of like those characters getting introduced in the first couple chapters, it wasn't meaningful to me as a reader yet, because I understand that they're not really setting up the B cast yet, and so they're going to be important somewhere for the story, but unless they appear again in chapter 4 and they get some time, they get some page time, I won't consider them important to the story. They might come up, but they might be more dead bodies. You know what I mean? Because they appeared at a point in the narrative where the audience is still focused on trying to figure out what it is they're paying attention to. And that's why the introduction of a supporting cast is usually pushed into this ratio of your story, into your movie, of your TV show, of your season, whatever. So I'm interested to see who the B cast is going to be, because that's what I'm going to be paying attention to at the tail end of chapter 4, depending on how long it is. I don't think we're going to go any further than that for the journey pattern. This is what I consider to be the kind of fun freedom part of the story, where the writer gets this chance to kind of open up and just tell a little bit about their world through the eyes of other characters, like other side characters, and establishing how they might fit into that world and fit into the story that you're about to experience. And then after that, it gets exciting. Like when Act 2 kicks off, I'm getting well ahead of myself. That's probably gonna be chapter 6 or something. But that's it. I'm going to end this episode here. I hope you guys are enjoying these, and I hope to do them more regularly now that I've got things sort of stabilized again. I've moved this series onto this channel where the appropriate audience is for them, and we'll see. I'll try to do these every weekend. If I miss a weekend, I'll probably do it the next weekend. So it's either going to be every week or every 2 weeks, because I do want to give some thought into breaking them down, although I'm doing it kind of live right now. So I really just have to rewatch this back and then take my notes based on what I'm doing freestyle. So there you go. That's the episode. I hope you guys are enjoying it, like I said, and leave comments down below. Just be careful with spoilers. Cool? Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire, everybody. Peace.